At 4:52 p.m. on a clear Tuesday, a single urgent command froze the third busiest airport in the world, grounding every plane on the tarmac. The order didn't come from the control tower or the FAA. It came from a woman standing alone in the terminal, her face still stinging from the humiliation of being wrongfully ejected from her flight just 10 minutes prior. She wasn't an activist or a threat. She was a brilliant engineer who saw a fatal flaw in the runway that no one else could, setting in motion a chain of events that would not only save 180 lives, but also deliver a devastating storm of karma upon every person who had wronged her. The air in the cabin of Aerovista Flight AV-712 to San Francisco was a stale cocktail of recycled oxygen, Lysol, and the faint, anxious scent of hundreds of strangers pressed together. Dr. Serafina Washington, her posture impeccable even in the cramped confines of Seat 12B, took a slow, centering breath. At 42, she carried an aura of quiet authority, a product of a life spent being the most competent person in rooms that rarely expected her to be. Her tailored blazer was sharp, her hair was styled in elegant professional locks, and the leather briefcase at her feet contained the culmination of 2 years of research, a keynote presentation on subsurface soil liquefaction that was set to be the highlight of the National Geotechnical Engineering Conference. This trip was the pinnacle of her career to date. She had stowed her small roller bag in the overhead bin, directly above her seat, a simple act she'd performed 1,000 times. She was settling in, reviewing her notes on a tablet, when a flustered voice pierced her concentration. "Excuse me, that's my spot." Serafina looked up. A woman perhaps a decade her senior, with a helmet of blonde hair and a face pinched with impatience, stood in the aisle. She gestured vaguely toward the overhead bin. Her name, Serafina would later learn, was Beverly Finch. "I'm sorry," Serafina asked, her voice calm and even. "My bag," Beverly said, pointing more directly this time at Serafina's modest black roller bag. "It needs to go in there. You'll have to move yours." Serafina glanced at the bin. It was half empty. Her bag was nestled neatly to one side. "There appears to be plenty of room," she stated, not as a question, but as a fact. "Your bag should fit just fine next to mine." Beverly's face tightened. "No, I need the whole space. It's a matched set," she said, indicating a large, garish leopard print roller and a matching duffel bag held by her beleaguered-looking husband, Gary. "They need to go in together right above my seat." She held up a boarding pass for Seat 12C. Serafina felt the familiar, weary prickle of a certain kind of confrontation brewing. It was the kind that wasn't about the thing it was about. It was never about the overhead bin. "Ma'am, the bins are first come, first served," Serafina explained patiently. "As you can see, there is more than enough space for all of our luggage." A flight attendant, a young man named Kyle with a slick-back undercut and an air of self-importance, bustled over. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his eyes immediately flicking to Serafina. "Yes," Beverly declared, her voice rising in pitch. "This woman is refusing to move her bag so I can stow my luggage." Kyle looked into the bin, then at Serafina. His smile was thin and practiced. "Ma'am, if you could just move your bag to another bin, we can get this sorted out and get on our way." Serafina's eyebrows rose. "Why should I have to move my bag? It was here first, and there is ample space for this passenger's luggage. Moving it further down the aisle would separate me from my belongings." It was a reasonable point, one that in a fair world would have ended the discussion. This was not that world. It would just be easier for everyone. Kyle insisted, his tone shifting from helpful to condescending. "We don't want to cause a delay. The only person causing a delay is this woman with her unreasonable demand." Serafina countered, her voice remaining steady but now edged with steel. She refused to be a pushover. Her entire life had been a battle against being pushed aside, made smaller, or told to move. Beverly, sensing an ally in Kyle, placed a hand on her chest and gasped theatrically. "She's being aggressive. I feel threatened." The word hung in the air, venomous and calculated. Aggressive. It was the classic loaded accusation, and it landed exactly as intended. Kyle's posture straightened. He was no longer a customer service agent. He was an enforcer. "Ma'am," he said, his voice now cold and official. "Airline policy states that flight attendants have final say on cabin storage. I am instructing you to move your bag." And I am telling you that your instruction is based on placating an unreasonable passenger, not on any actual policy or lack of space. Serafina replied, holding his gaze. She would not be intimidated. I'm a frequent flyer with this airline. I know the rules. The standoff was drawing attention. Phones were being subtly raised. The man in 12A, a businessman engrossed in his Wall Street Journal, was now peeking over the top of his paper. This is ridiculous, Beverly huffed. Just get her bag out of there. Kyle reached up his hand, hovering over Serafina's bag. Ma'am, I'm going to ask you one last time. Move the bag or I'll have to call the gate agent. Then you should call the gate agent, Serafina said, her heart now hammering against her ribs, a furious drumbeat of indignation. Because you are not touching my property. Kyle's face flushed with anger. He pulled his radio from his belt. I need a supervisor at the jet bridge for 712. We have a non-compliant passenger. The words echoed in the small cabin. Non-compliant passenger. The label, so sterile and bureaucratic, was designed to strip a person of their story, their reason, their humanity. Serafina Washington, doctor of engineering, industry leader, keynote speaker, was reduced to a problem to be solved. A few minutes later, a stern-faced supervisor named Brenda Jenkins marched down the aisle. She listened with a grim expression as Kyle and Beverly gave their heavily biased version of events, painting Serafina as hostile and uncooperative. Brenda didn't ask Serafina for her side of the story. She didn't glance at the half-empty bin. She looked at the determined black woman in seat 12B and saw only an obstacle to an on-time departure. Ma'am, Brenda said, her voice devoid of any warmth, you are holding up this flight. You have two options. You can move your bag and comply with the flight attendant's instructions, or you can deplane. Serafina stared at her in disbelief. I can be forced to leave a flight I paid for because another passenger wants a bin to herself and your flight attendant sided with her. Is that what you're telling me? I'm telling you to comply with the crew. Brenda snapped, her patience gone. Final decision. What's it going to be? A profound and chilling clarity washed over Serafina. She looked at the smug, triumphant face of Beverly Finch, the officious glare of Kyle, and the stone wall of Brenda Jenkins. She saw the averted eyes of the other passengers, some embarrassed, some annoyed at the delay, but none willing to speak up. She realized with a sinking heart that she could not win. They held all the power and they had already passed their judgment. To argue further was to cede what little dignity she had left. With slow, deliberate movements, Serafina unbuckled her seatbelt. She stood up her 5.9 frame, commanding a presence in the narrow aisle. She didn't look at Beverly or Kyle. She looked at Brenda. I will not be treated this way, she said, her voice low but carrying through the silent cabin. You are making a grave mistake. She reached up, retrieved her roller bag, and grabbed her briefcase. As she turned to walk a passenger in the row behind her, a young man who had been filming the entire exchange whispered, That's messed up. I got you. Serafina gave a faint, almost imperceptible nod. She walked the length of the aisle, her head held high, each step a testament to her self-control. She felt the burn of dozens of pairs of eyes on her back. As she stepped off the plane and onto the jet bridge, she heard the cabin door click shut behind her. The sound was final. It was the sound of her humiliation being sealed. Brenda Jenkins escorted her back into the terminal, her face a mask of bureaucratic indifference. Your luggage will be removed from the hold, Brenda said coolly. You can rebook your flight at the customer service desk. Have a nice day. Serafina stood alone in the bustling concourse of Gate K-12. She watched through the vast terminal window as Aerovista flight AV-712, her flight pushed back from the gate. Inside that plane were her colleagues, her opportunity, and the people who had just publicly stripped her of her dignity. A tear of pure, hot rage traced a path down her cheek. She felt small, powerless, and utterly defeated. The plane began its slow, lumbering taxi toward the runway, a silver symbol of her exclusion growing smaller and smaller in the distance. The world, it seemed, was moving on without her. The customer service desk was a special circle of hell reserved for the wronged and the weary. The line was long, a meandering snake of miserable people, each with their own tale of canceled flights and lost baggage. Serafina stood at the back, the adrenaline from the confrontation curdling into a cold, heavy dread in the pit of her stomach. The keynote speech was tomorrow morning. The chances of getting another direct flight that would get her to San Francisco in time were shrinking with every passing minute. She finally reached the counter, explaining her situation to a harried agent who offered a vapid apology and a seat on the red-eye arriving at 5 a.m. It was a disaster. She would have no time to rest to prepare to center herself before stepping onto the biggest stage of her professional life. Defeated, she accepted the ticket and walked away, feeling a profound sense of injustice. She found a seat at an empty gate, sinking into the hard plastic chair. The terminal was a blur of motion and noise, but for Serafina, the world had ground to a halt. She replayed the incident in her mind, her cheeks burning with shame. The condescension in Kyle's voice, the malicious triumph in Beverly's eyes, the wall of indifference from Brenda, the silence of the other passengers. It was a humiliation by 1,000 cuts. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her mentor, Dr. Peterson, who was already at the conference. "Sarah, where are you? We're all heading to the welcome dinner. Can't wait to hear you knock 'em dead tomorrow." She typed a reply, her fingers fumbling. "Had an issue with my flight. I've been rebooked on the red eye. I'll miss the dinner. See you in the morning." She left out the sordid details. She couldn't bear to explain. Leaning her head against the cool glass of the terminal window, she stared out at the sprawling airfield. O'Hare was an engineering marvel, a city unto itself, with arteries of asphalt and concrete, pulsing with the lifeblood of aviation. She had a unique appreciation for it. Her firm TerraSolid Engineering had been a key consultant on the new Runway 10C-28C expansion project 5 years ago. She had personally spent 18 months on site poring over soil composition reports, groundwater surveys, and compaction data. She knew the earth beneath this airport better than the pilots knew the sky above it. Her gaze drifted following the path her former flight AV-712 would be taking. The plane was now a distant silver speck taxiing along Taxiway Bravo, approaching the threshold of runway 28R for takeoff. The sun was beginning its slow descent, casting long shadows across the tarmac. And then she saw it. It was nothing a layperson would ever notice. It was a detail so subtle, so minute, that only someone with her specific ingrained expertise would recognize its terrifying significance. Near the intersection of Taxiway Bravo and Runway 28R, there was a patch of asphalt that was just slightly darker than the surrounding area. It was a dampness, a persistent weeping of moisture where there should be none on a dry, clear afternoon. More critically, she noticed a faint, almost imperceptible depression, a shallow swale in the pavement that followed the line of an underground stormwater culvert she knew was buried 20 feet below. Her mind, a repository of geotechnical schematics and failure mode analyses, began to race. She zoomed in with her phone's camera, the image pixelated but clear enough. She saw it. Faint hairline, concentric cracks radiating from the center of the depression. They were textbook tension cracks. Her blood ran cold. It wasn't just a simple pothole forming. The signs were unmistakable to her trained eye. The persistent dampness pointed to a broken pipe below. The water was saturating the subgrade, filled the crushed stone and compacted earth that formed the foundation of the runway. This saturation was causing a phenomenon she had lectured on dozens of times, pumping of fines. The hydraulic pressure from taxiing aircraft was literally pumping the fine-grained particles, the silt and sand, out of the subgrade, creating a cavity. The depression, the water, the cracks, they weren't the problem. They were the symptoms of the problem. The problem was the growing hidden void beneath the pavement, a sinkhole. Every time a plane rolled over that spot, its immense weight, a Boeing 737 like AV-712, weighed over 170,000 pounds, was pressing down on a thinning crust of asphalt over a cavern. It was a catastrophic failure waiting for the right trigger. And the immense focused thrust and vibration of a plane at takeoff could be that exact trigger. The image of flight AV-712, her flight now holding short of that very runway, flashed in her mind. On board were nearly 200 people. Beverly Finch, Kyle, the silent passengers. They were all about to accelerate to 150 miles per hour over a ticking time bomb. Her personal humiliation, her anger, her ruined travel plans, it all evaporated, replaced by a surge of pure professional terror. The injustice done to her didn't matter anymore. The lives of 180 people did. She scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She had to warn someone. Now. She sprinted back towards gate K-12, her mind a whirlwind. She saw Brenda Jenkins standing near the podium, overseeing the boarding of another flight. "Brenda!" Serafina called out, her voice sharp with urgency. Brenda turned and her face soured instantly upon seeing Serafina. "What do you want now? I thought I told you to go to customer service." "Listen to me," Serafina said, breathing heavily. "You have to stop Flight 7112. You have to close Runway 28R. There's a critical structural failure on the taxiway." Brenda stared at her as if she'd grown a second head. "Oh, what are you, crazy? I'm not doing that." "Hoy, I'm a geotechnical engineer," Serafina implored, pulling her professional ID from her wallet. "My company consulted on this runway. I'm seeing signs of incipient subgrade collapse near the Bravo taxiway intersection. You have to—" Brenda cut her off with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Oh, I see. You're an engineer. You got kicked off your flight, and now 10 minutes later, you've suddenly discovered a structural failure as payback. It's pathetic. You're just trying to cause trouble." The accusation was so cynical, so grotesquely misaligned with the life-or-death reality of the situation that it stole Serafina's breath. "This isn't about me," she insisted, her voice rising with desperation. "This is about the safety of that plane. The pavement is about to collapse." "Security," Brenda called out, taking a step back. "Security to gate K-12. This woman is harassing me and making threats." Serafina stared in horror. She was being dismissed again, but this time the stakes were infinitely higher. She looked past Brenda through the window. AV-72 was being cleared for position and hold. It was now on the runway, lining up for its takeoff roll. She had maybe 2 minutes. Brenda wouldn't listen. Security would only detain her. Bureaucracy was about to kill 180 people. She realized with chilling certainty that there was only one person at this airport who would understand the technical language she was using and who had the authority to act on it, instantly bypassing the entire chain of command. She turned and ran, ignoring Brenda's shouts behind her. She pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen, scrolling through contacts from 5 years ago. It was a long shot. People move on, change jobs, change numbers. But she had to try. Her finger stabbed the screen. Robert Morrison, Director of Airfield Operations, GEA. The phone rang once, twice. Serafina prayed. On the other side of the glass, the engines of Flight AV-712 began to spool up their low whine, escalating to a deep, powerful roar. "Morrison!" The voice on the other end was clipped, busy, and blessedly familiar. "Robert, it's Serafina Washington. Dr. Serafina Washington from Terra Solid." She spoke quickly, her words tumbling over each other as she ran towards a quieter corner of the concourse, away from the approaching security guards. There was a brief pause. "Sarah, it's been years. What can I do for you? I'm in the middle of something." "So am I." She gasped, her eyes locked on the 737 at the end of the runway. Its landing lights were blazing. "Robert, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You have to issue an immediate ground stop for runway 28R. An immediate stop." "What, Sarah, do you have any idea what you're asking?" "That's our primary departure runway. I can't just—" "Robert, you have to—" She cut in, her voice cracking with urgency. "I am looking at the threshold from the terminal at Kilo Concourse. There is a Class 3 differential settlement event occurring over the main stormwater culvert at the Bravo taxiway intersection. I'm seeing alligator cracking and evidence of pumping of fines. The subgrade is compromised. I am telling you, with my professional license on the line, that the pavement is on the verge of a catastrophic void collapse." The language she used was a key. It was the specific technical jargon that no disgruntled passenger could ever fake. It bypassed the emotional part of Robert's brain and spoke directly to the engineer. He knew what every one of those terms meant. He knew the potential energy of a 170,000-pound aircraft hitting a weak spot at 150 miles per hour. "Are you certain?" Morrison's voice had lost its casual edge. It was now sharp, focused. 100%, Serafina said. "Aero Vista 712 is on the runway right now, spooled up for takeoff. They are directly in the potential failure zone." She didn't have to say another word. In the Airport Operations Center, a state-of-the-art command hub miles away, Robert Morrison was already in motion. He hit a large red button on his console that broadcast his voice across every critical frequency at O'Hare, the control tower, ground control, and airline operations centers. His voice amplified an authoritative boom from radios across the airfield. Tower, this is Morrison in AOC. Issue an immediate ground stop on all surfaces. I repeat, all surfaces. Hold all aircraft in position. Abort any takeoff, roll in progress. I want runway 28R closed effective immediately. In the control tower, a flurry of motion erupted. The tower chief, a man named Dave, relayed the order with no hesitation. You didn't question a direct order from the director of operations. Aerovista 7112 Tower, abort takeoff. I say again, Aerovista 7112, abort hold position. On the flight deck of AV 7112, Captain Evans and his first officer were just about to release the brakes. The order from the tower was so sudden, so jarring, that Evans instinctively pulled the throttles back to idle. Abort, abort, he confirmed, his heart leaping into his throat. Tower Aerovista 712 holding position. Reason for the abort. Stand by, Aerovista. The tower replied, the controller's voice tight with controlled chaos. The effect of the ground stop was instantaneous and massive. Across the sprawling airfield, dozens of aircraft 747s, laden with cargo regional jets, international super jumbos, froze in place. Planes at gates halted their pushback. Planes on taxiways stopped dead. The intricate clockwork ballet of one of the world's busiest airports seized up completely. The silence, punctuated only by the idling of jet engines, was eerie. Back in the terminal, Serafina sagged against a pillar, the phone still pressed to her ear. She could hear Morrison barking orders in the background. Get me airfield ops crew with GPR equipment to the threshold of 20 MR at Bravo. Now I want a full geotechnical survey, and get me visual confirmation on that pavement depression. Two security guards finally caught up to her, their expressions grim. Ma'am, you need to come with us. You've caused a serious disturbance. Before Serafina could respond, Brenda Jenkins arrived, her face a thunderous mask of fury. There you are. Do you have any idea what you've done? You made a crank call and shut down the entire airport. You'll be facing federal charges for this. But Serafina just held up her phone where Robert Morrison was still on the line. Robert, she said, her voice shaking but clear. The supervisor who had me removed from my flight is here with security. She's accusing me of making a crank call. Put her on the phone, Morrison commanded. Serafina handed the phone to Brenda. The director of airfield operations wants to speak with you. Brenda snatched the phone, a sneer on her face, clearly believing it was a bluff. This is Brenda Jenkins, Aerovista supervisor. She snapped into the receiver. Serafina watched as the color drained from Brenda's face. Her sneer dissolved into a slack-jawed expression of horror. She began to stammer. Yes, Director Morrison. I didn't realize. No, sir. Yes, I understand. Of course. She handed the phone back to Serafina as if it were radioactive. Her eyes, which had been filled with contempt just moments before now, held a new emotion, fear. The two security guards, having overheard the exchange, shifted uncomfortably. Their demeanor changed from accusatory to cautious. Through the window, the scene was one of controlled pandemonium. Red and white emergency vehicles, lights flashing, were now racing down the closed runway, converging on the very spot Serafina had indicated. The passengers on AV 712, who had been anticipating the G-force of takeoff, were instead staring out their windows at the approaching fire trucks and maintenance vehicles, their quiet murmurs of annoyance growing into a chorus of confused and anxious questions. Inside the cabin, Kyle, the flight attendant, was trying to manage the rising panic. Folks, please remain seated, he announced over the PA system, his voice strained. The captain has informed us of an unforeseen issue on the runway. We should have more information shortly. Beverly Finch in seat 12C was incensed. This is unbelievable, she complained loudly to her husband. First that awful woman holds us up, and now this. I have a meeting. A multi-million-dollar merger depends on me being in San Francisco this afternoon. 10 minutes had passed since Serafina was forced off the plane. 10 minutes that began with her own profound humiliation and ended with her shutting down O'Hare International Airport. She wasn't a troublemaker anymore. She was either a fool who had committed career suicide and was about to be arrested, or she was a hero who had just saved 180 lives. As she watched the emergency crews deploy their equipment under the setting sun, she knew the truth was buried just a few feet beneath the asphalt, and it was about to come to light. The twilight on the airfield at O'Hare was a theater of controlled chaos. The normal, thunderous symphony of departing jets had been replaced by an eerie hush, punctuated by the crackle of radios and the urgent, rhythmic flashing of red and white lights. A cordon of emergency vehicles formed a protective circle around the designated patch of asphalt on runway 28R, their headlights cutting through the deepening gloom and illuminating a scene of immense tension. To the hundreds of passengers watching from grounded planes and terminal windows, it was a confusing spectacle. But for the handful of people on the tarmac, it was the site of a potential tomb. The airfield operations crew, led by a grizzled veteran technician named Frank Costello, moved with a solemn efficiency. Frank, a man who had spent 30 years reading the secret language of pavement stress, had seen it all: thermal cracking, from the brutal Chicago winters, spalling from chemical de-icers, rutting from the relentless weight of jumbo jets. But as he knelt, his gloved hand tracing the faint, web-like alligator cracks near the Bravo taxiway intersection, he felt a familiar, unwelcome prickle on the back of his neck. This felt different. "It's weeping," he muttered to his younger colleague, pointing to the dark, damp sheen on the asphalt that shouldn't have been there. "Groundwater's too low here." "That's not right." His supervisor, watching from the command truck, radioed in. "Status, Frank. Deploying the GPR." Frank called back, his voice grim. "Visually, it's consistent with what the director relayed. Let's see what the picture tells us." The ground-penetrating radar unit, a sophisticated device resembling a high-tech lawnmower, was rolled into position. Its job was to paint a picture of the unseen, to send electromagnetic pulses deep into the earth and interpret their echoes. Frank began his first pass, his eyes glued to the ruggedized laptop screen that displayed the data in real time. He pushed the cart forward, and a cross-section of the runway's foundation began to scroll across the display. The top layer, 18 inches of dense asphalt, appeared as a solid, bright band. Below it, the thick layer of crushed aggregate sub-base was a slightly less uniform but still solid block. Below that, there should have been the dense, homogeneous signal of compacted earth, the bedrock upon which the entire structure relied. Instead, the signal vanished. On the screen, where there should have been solid earth, there was a gaping black hole, a dead zone. The radio waves went in and never came back. "Whoa!" the younger tech whispered, leaning in. "Is the unit malfunctioning?" Frank stopped, his heart hammering. He knew it wasn't a malfunction. He pushed the GPR back and forth, mapping the anomaly's edges. It was enormous, a vast hidden chamber lurking just beneath the surface. He switched the display to a 3D rendering. The void was shaped like a hideous flattened dome, a bubble of nothingness waiting to pop. "Get the director over here," Frank said, his voice strained. He keyed his own radio. "AOC, this is Costello on 28R. You need to see this. We have a confirmed void. Repeat, a major confirmed void. Initial estimate is approximately 15 feet in diameter, maybe 8 to 10 feet deep. The asphalt deck above it, God in the center, it can't be more than a few inches thick. The words, spoken with the calm terror of a seasoned professional, sent a shockwave through the command structure. A few inches of asphalt was all that separated a 170,000-pound aircraft from being swallowed by the earth. On the flight deck of Aerovista 7112, still holding its position on the runway, Captain Evans and his first officer were growing increasingly tense. The initial abort order had been jarring. The subsequent radio silence was unnerving. "What do you think, Mike?" the captain asked, peering out at the flashing lights. "Bird strike, they missed debris on the runway?" "Could be," First Officer Mike Sloan replied, "but they wouldn't shut down the whole field for that. This is something else, something big." Just then, the voice of Robert Morrison, the director of airfield operations, crackled through their headsets, broadcast directly from the scene. They heard Frank Costello's chilling assessment: "Confirmed void, 15 feet in diameter, a few inches thick." Captain Evans felt the blood drain from his face. He exchanged a wide-eyed, horrified look with his first officer. They both visualized it instantly, their nose gear, under the immense stress of the takeoff roll, punching through that fragile crust of asphalt. The plane would have cartwheeled, torn itself to pieces, and erupted in a fireball. Their professional training prepared them for engine failures, for wind shear, for a dozen different emergencies in the air. Nothing prepared them for the very ground beneath them simply ceasing to exist. "My God," Mike whispered, taking off his headset as if it had burned him. "We were right on top of it. We were next." The captain took a long, shaky breath, his hands gripping the yoke. The abstract annoyance of the delay had been replaced by the visceral, icy reality of their near demise. "Get the cabin crew lead up here," he commanded, his voice hoarse. He had to talk to his passengers, and he had to find out who had made the call that saved them. Inside the cabin, the mood had curdled from impatience into a thick soup of anxiety. The sight of the emergency vehicles had silenced the grumbling. Now whispers filled the air. Beverly Finch was vibrating with a furious energy. "This is a lawsuit," she hissed to her husband Gary. "A massive lawsuit. They can't just hold us hostage on the tarmac. My deal is collapsing with every minute that passes." Kyle, the flight attendant, was trying to maintain a professional veneer, but his smile was stretched thin, and his movements were jerky. He kept glancing out the window, his mind racing. He had been so proud of his decisive action, of enforcing the rules, of putting that arrogant woman in her place. But the scale of the response outside felt horribly disproportionate to a simple passenger dispute. A seed of doubt had taken root and was growing into a tree of dread. Then the captain's voice came over the PA system. The usual smooth, confident cadence was gone. In its place was a voice filled with a profound, somber gravity that seized the attention of every single person in the cabin. "Folks, this is the captain speaking." He paused and the silence stretched. I have an update for you. I ask for your complete attention. The reason for our aborted takeoff in the current ground stop is due to the detection of a catastrophic structural failure on the runway surface directly in our path." He let the word sink in. Catastrophic structural failure. To be precise, he continued, his voice thick with emotion, "it has been confirmed that a large sinkhole was forming beneath the pavement. Had we proceeded with our takeoff, the consequences would have been unimaginable. The structural integrity of the runway was compromised to the breaking point." A collective audible gasp swept through the cabin. A woman in the back let out a small choked sob. Beverly Finch froze mid-rant, her mouth agape, the words about her multi-million-dollar deal dying on her lips. She stared out the window, not at the flashing lights, but at the solid-looking ground, now understanding the abyss that it concealed. The woman she had tormented, the woman whose bags she couldn't tolerate, had been right. Her final words, "You are making a grave mistake," now echoed in Beverly's mind, not as a threat, but as a prophecy. A prophecy that had almost come true for everyone on board. Kyle stumbled back into the galley, leaning against the counter for support. His legs felt weak. He saw Dr. Washington's face in his mind, her calm, intelligent eyes, her unwavering composure. He hadn't seen a non-compliant passenger. He had seen a black woman who needed to be put in her place, and he had used his sliver of authority to do it. The weight of his misjudgment, of his petty bias, came crashing down on him. He had been an agent of her humiliation, and in doing so, he had almost ejected the flight's guardian angel. The captain's voice returned, heavy with a significance that no one could miss. "We are being towed back to the terminal. I want to be unequivocally clear. The initial report of this danger did not come from our instruments or from airport systems. It came from an individual who spotted the threat and had the expertise to understand it. That person saved the lives of every single one of us on board tonight. I don't yet have a name, but on behalf of the entire crew, whoever you are, thank you." Back in the terminal, the atmosphere around Serafina had undergone a seismic shift. Robert Morrison had arrived, his face pale, but his eyes shining with a mixture of horror and profound respect. "Sarah," he said, shaking her hand with both of his, "I knew your work was good. I had no idea you had superpowers." He looked over at the still trembling Brenda Jenkins and the two sheepish security guards. His gaze was glacial. "I trust Dr. Washington has been treated with the utmost respect since I called." Brenda could only nod, her face a crumpled mess of regret. Her entire professional reality, built on a foundation of rules, checklists, and unwavering adherence to the chain of command, had been shattered. She had followed the procedure for a disruptive passenger, and in doing so had almost become an accomplice to mass casualties. She saw now that Dr. Washington hadn't been breaking rules. She had been operating on a level of understanding Brenda couldn't even comprehend. The deplaning of Flight AV-12 was a surreal procession. The passengers didn't rush out angry about their canceled flight. They walked slowly as if in a trance, their faces pale and etched with the shock of their close brush with death. They filed past the area where Serafina now sat with the airport's top brass. They saw her the woman from the confrontation, and the pieces clicked into place. They knew. One by one, they looked at her. A businessman who had hidden behind his newspaper now met her eyes with a look of deep, abject shame. The young man who filmed the incident gave her a solemn nod of immense respect. A mother holding her child's hand simply mouthed the words, "Thank you." There was no applause, no grand scene. It was something deeper, more profound, a quiet collective acknowledgement of her grace and their debt. Then came Beverly Finch. She saw Serafina and stopped dead. Her expensive handbag slipped from her shoulder, hitting the polished floor with a dull thud. Her face, usually a mask of aggressive confidence, was nakedly transparent. In her eyes, Serafina saw it all, the terror of what could have been, the humiliation of her public misdeed, and the agonizing, soul-crushing realization that she owed her life to the woman she had so casually and cruelly dismissed. Serafina didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply held Beverly's gaze, her expression one of calm, quiet strength. In that silent, charged moment, her vindication was absolute. It wasn't about being right. It was about being heard. She hadn't needed to raise her voice. She had forced the world to bend to the sheer, undeniable gravity of her knowledge. Her humiliation in the cabin of the plane was a fleeting, bitter memory. Her triumph here under the sterile lights of the terminal was as solid and real as the ground that had almost betrayed them all. The internet does not sleep, and it does not forgive. Before the last passenger from the ghost flight AV-12 had even found their way to a hotel or a connecting flight, the story had already begun its inexorable digital metastasis. The spark was the 2-minute video uploaded by the young man from row 14. He titled it simply, "Woman Kicked Off Flight for Overhead Bin, 10 Mins Before She Saved Everyone." At first, it was a curiosity garnering comments like, "Classic Karen move," and "That flight attendant is on a power trip." But then the official news alerts began to hit phones. "Breaking: O'Hare Airport shut down due to runway emergency. Catastrophe narrowly averted." Someone connected the dots. The video was cross-posted with the news headlines, and the spark became an inferno. By sunrise, it was the #1 trending topic worldwide. News outlets, sensing a story with perfect heroes and villains, scrambled their teams. The narrative was irresistible: the calm, dignified black woman, a hidden genius, versus the snarling face of entitlement and the cold indifference of corporate bureaucracy. The footage of Serafina's quiet, steely departure from the plane was played on a loop, contrasted with shaky phone footage from other passengers showing the flashing lights on the dark runway. The captain's solemn, emotional announcement was transcribed and quoted in dozens of articles. Dr. Serafina Washington wasn't just a hero, she was an icon of grace under immense pressure. In the sterile 50th floor boardroom of Aerovista's corporate headquarters, panic was the only item on the agenda. The CEO, a man named Mark Harrington, stared at a screen displaying a stock chart that looked like a ski slope. 15%, the CFO said, his voice hollow. "We've lost over $1 billion in market value since the market opened this morning. $1 billion. And it's still falling." Purity, the head of public relations, a sharp woman named Jessica, pointed to another screen filled with social media feeds. Fly Like Finch was trending, with people posting pictures of their own reasonably sized luggage. Boycott Aerovista was right behind it. "This isn't just a safety incident, which is bad enough," Jessica stated, her voice cutting through the panic. "This is a cultural crisis. The video of our crew and that passenger Beverly Finch is poison. We look like bullies who were saved from our own incompetence by the very person we victimized. We can't spin this. We have to get in front of it." The discussion was brutal and swift. The airline's legal counsel was blunt. Kyle, the flight attendant, and Brenda Jenkins, the supervisor, are indefensible. Their actions captured on video are the primary catalyst. They represent an immediate and disposable liability. There was no debate. Before the morning was over, Kyle and Brenda received cold impersonal calls from Human Resources. They were terminated effective immediately for gross misconduct and failure to adhere to the company's core values, values that until 24 hours ago, they thought they were upholding. Their careers in aviation were over their names, forever linked to a viral story of prejudice and poor judgment. Kyle, who had dreamed of being a pilot, would be lucky to ever set foot on a plane again without being recognized. Brenda, who prided herself on her long, unblemished record, saw her legacy reduced to a single catastrophic error broadcast to the world. Next was the issue of Dr. Washington. "We have to make this right," the CEO insisted, "whatever it takes." Their lawyers reached out not to Serafina directly, but to the legal counsel for her firm, TerraSolid Engineering. They were met by a formidable attorney named Maria Flores, who had been briefed by Serafina. The airline's initial offer was a significant seven-figure sum in a private apology. Maria Flores, on behalf of her client, laughed. "Dr. Washington isn't interested in your hush money," Maria stated, her voice cool as ice over the conference call. "She is interested in meaningful systemic change. Here are our terms. First, the financial settlement will be substantially larger, a portion of which will be used as seed money for a foundation Dr. Washington is establishing. Second, Aerovista will issue a full public and unreserved apology from the CEO himself, explicitly detailing the company's failures in this incident. Third, and non-negotiable, Aerovista will partner with a diversity and inclusion consultancy of Dr. Washington's choosing to completely overhaul your employee training from the baggage handlers to the flight deck. Aerovista's board, seeing their brand value in freefall, had no choice. They agreed to everything. The eight-figure settlement was wired, and CEO Mark Harrington delivered a humiliating public address, reading a statement that was clearly crafted by Serafina's legal team, admitting fault and promising a new era of respect and listening at his airline. Beverly Finch did not see the CEO's apology. She was living through her own personal hell. After the slow, shame-filled walk through the terminal, she had checked into an airport hotel, her mind a maelstrom of fury and fear. Her first calls were to her managing partners at the private equity firm, trying to salvage her multi-billion-dollar hostile takeover. The response was glacial. "The optics on this are terrible, Bev," her boss Richard told her, his voice devoid of sympathy. "The board of the target company has seen the news. They've postponed the final vote indefinitely. They cited concerns about the character and public reputation of our lead negotiator." "You can fix this, Richard," she pleaded. "Put out a statement. Tell them it's a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," Richard scoffed. "Beverly, there is a video of you harassing a woman who went on to save your life and the lives of 180 others from a disaster you were actively exacerbating. You didn't just miss a meeting. You became the villain in a global news story. Our firm's reputation is built on shark-like precision, not petty public spectacle." The final blow came the next afternoon via a sterile video conference. The firm's ethics committee had been convened. She was fired. Her unvested stock options vanished. Her partnerships were dissolved. Her entire professional identity, built over 25 years of ruthless ambition, was erased because of a dispute over a piece of leopard print luggage. Her social world collapsed just as quickly. The invitations to charity galas stopped. Her calls to her friends from the club went to voicemail. She had built a life on the shaky ground of power and influence. And like the runway at O'Hare, the foundation had given way, revealing a gaping void beneath. She was left with nothing but her expensive luggage and the bitter ironclad knowledge that she owed her life to the woman whose dignity she had tried to steal. Serafina weathered the media storm from a quiet hotel suite with Robert Morrison and her lawyer Maria acting as gatekeepers. She ignored the endless requests for talk show appearances and tabloid interviews. Her focus was elsewhere. The first important call came from the frantic organizer of the National Geotechnical Engineering Conference. "Dr. Washington, we are so relieved you are safe. We saw the news. It's unbelievable. We understand if you cannot make it, but if there is any chance, your story, it's all anyone is talking about." Serafina looked at her notes for her original keynote, a brilliant but dry presentation on soil liquefaction. She knew she had a new speech to give. "I'll be there," she said calmly. "Book my flight. On any airline but Aerovista. Flying first class to San Francisco, she refined her message. This wasn't a story about her, it was a story about structures. The physical structures we build and the social structures we inhabit. It was about how both can have hidden systemic weaknesses that, if ignored, lead to catastrophic failure. She stepped onto the stage to a thunderous standing ovation that lasted for 5 full minutes. When she began to speak, the hall fell silent. We as engineers are trained to see the invisible. She began, her voice resonating with quiet power. We use science to detect the stress fractures in steel, the shear weaknesses in soil, the hidden voids beneath a placid surface. But what if we applied that same rigor to the human systems we navigate every day? The systems of bias, of prejudice, of casual dismissal. These two are structural flaws. They are hidden voids that can lead to catastrophic failure if the voices of those who detect them are silenced. She told the story of Flight AV-712, not as a personal grievance, but as a perfect, terrifying case study. She linked the pumping of fines from the Runway subgrade to the way society systematically pumps value and credibility away from women and people of color. The audience, engineers, academics, scientists, was spellbound. It was a technical lecture and a powerful sermon all in one. Her speech became legendary. Her firm TerraSolid Engineering was inundated with offers. They weren't just hired to consult on soil composition anymore. They were hired for their integrity for the Washington Standard. With the settlement funds, she officially launched the Washington Foundation for Excellence, announcing its mission on national television. We will find the brilliant minds in overlooked communities, she explained, and we will ensure they have the resources and mentorship not just to enter the fields of science and engineering, but to lead them. We need to build a world where the next person to spot a fatal flaw is already in a position to be heard, no argument necessary. Days later, back in her own quiet office, surrounded by geological maps and soil density charts, Serafina looked out the window. The whirlwind of fame and the downfall of her detractors felt distant. They were consequences, not the goal. Her vindication wasn't in their ruin, but in her own resilience. She had been publicly shamed and forced off a plane. 10 minutes later, she had shut down an entire runway. And in the days that followed, she had leveraged that moment to begin the work of shutting down the flawed systems that had put her in that position in the first place, that she knew was a structure built to last. That's the incredible story of Dr. Serafina Washington. It's a stark reminder that the person you dismiss today could be the one you desperately need tomorrow. The confrontation on that plane wasn't just about an overhead bin, it was about respect, dignity, and the dangerous consequences of prejudice. Dr. Washington's story shows us that true power isn't in a uniform or a job title. It's in knowledge, integrity, and the courage to speak truth, even when you're being silenced. If this story of karmic justice and professional brilliance resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Stories like these matter. They remind us to look beyond our biases and to value the expertise in our midst. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell so you won't miss our next deep dive into real-life drama and inspiring tales of triumph. Thank you for listening.